Hello again and welcome to the Rideau Heights Public School Grow Garden. In a usual year, Anne and I would have already planted the garden with our Grow students in late April. But this year, it's just Anne and I, all by our lonesome, to plant this beautiful garden. So we're really happy that we can share this experience with you virtually. One of the things that people consider when they're first starting to plant their garden is what do they want to grow? But they also need to think a lot about what they can grow given the conditions that they have. Some people like to plant a rainbow garden where there's lots of different colors in their crops and their flowers. Others plant a pizza garden where all the vegetables and herbs that they're planting will make a great topping for a pizza, like tomatoes and green peppers and basil and oregano. We usually want to have lots of food from our gardens that we can use for our salad bar celebrations with our Grow students in June. So we want to plant cool weather crops that will grow quickly and give us a great harvest so everyone can enjoy it. So we plant crops like lettuce and spinach, arugula, radishes, peas and onions, and more. Students do the research and decide what vegetables they would like to put into their school gardens.
This year we'll be planting gardens at several grow schools, and the food that we grow will be donated to people in our community. So when we're thinking about what to grow, we're thinking about what grows well in these conditions, of course, but we're also thinking about what crops would be best for donation. And in truth, all fresh produce is great for donation. People who are struggling with food insecurity, unfortunately, can have a challenging time getting fresh veggies. Having said that, though, some foods are particularly good when they have a lot of energy, when they can store for a relatively long period of time, or when they're easy to prepare. So spring crops that would fit that bill include kale, peas, Swiss chard, beets. There's other vegetables like lettuce and radish, and those are great too because they grow quite early in the year and people are familiar with them and they don't take a lot of preparation. Others which are excellent include potatoes or squash, but we're going to wait until it gets a little bit warmer before we plant those. I'm in a nice open part of the garden and I'm going to be planting beet seeds here. So beets do best in full sun, though they can tolerate a little bit of shade. I'm going to plant them at the depth of about 1 centimeter, and a good rule of thumb when you're planting any seed is to plant them to the depth about 2 times the diameter of the seed. So tiny seeds like lettuce or radish will be quite close to the surface, whereas bigger seeds will be a little bit deeper. I'm planting the beet seeds about 3 to 5 centimeters apart, and I find these stakes quite helpful for spacing things out, much the way Kath showed us in her video about planting into raised beds. Now, as the seedlings grow, we'll keep the strongest looking ones, and we'll thin the rest out or remove the rest. And that just ensures that there's enough air circulation and space and nutrients for all the beets to grow healthy and to grow to a good size. And here's a fun fact. Beets are actually the same plant as Swiss chard, which is a leafy vegetable, and it's beautiful. And it's another one of our Grow Garden favorites. So when you're thinning out the beet seedlings, you can eat them, and then nothing needs to go to waste. I'll tell you another fact. I'm not usually a straight line kind of person by nature. I do recommend planting in straight lines, though, especially if you're a beginner gardener. Once the seeds start germinating and once weeds start popping up, if you have a straight row of really similar looking seedlings, then it's a lot easier to tell what's a crop seedling and what's a weed seedling. Now I'm just going to finish planting these seeds, give them a good soak of water right after I've planted them and covered them, and Brenda is going to talk to you about growing up.
Many of us have limited space for gardening, but we want to be able to grow as much food as possible. So what's a way to maximize our garden space? We can grow up. I'm going to be planting some peas at the base of this trellis that we made, and the trellis will provide the support for the pea plant to grow all the way up to the top and get great exposure to the sun. If you're growing vegetables at home that need a trellis, you might want to think about building a larger structure that kids could actually go on the inside and have a great snack from the plants that are growing on the outside. Peas are a really great spring crop because we can plant them as early as we can once the soil is workable. They're also one of my favorites, so I like to plant lots of them. One of the things that we need to remember is that when we put a structure into the garden like a trellis, it's going to have an impact on the other plants that are nearby. So in terms of our trellis, it's going to cast some shade. We always want to think about where our sun is and where our shade is when we're planting the garden. So anything that we plant near the peas is going to have a little bit of shade time during the day. So we want to look at a crop that is going to be okay with that bit of shade. And one of the ones that we've come to is kale. We love kale with the Grow Project. It's such a great plant and it's super nutritious. We can use it to make our wonderful Grow Project smoothies, and it's great for everybody to eat because it's great in salads and soups and even kale chips. There's one more thing that I'd like to talk to you about before we hear from some local farmers. You may have noticed that we've got one plant already growing in our spring garden, and you might wonder why. The plant is sorrel, and it's a beautiful herb that has a lovely lemon flavor to it. And it's a perennial. You might remember that a perennial plant is one that comes back every year and doesn't need to be seeded. The other thing that's already growing in our grow garden is the garlic. It's not a perennial, but it was planted in the fall with Farmer Josh by the students from the Grow Project. Soon we'll be able to see that curly top that grows up with the garlic scape, and in the middle of July we will harvest some beautiful garlic bulbs. And we like lots of garlic with the Grow Project because it goes in so many great recipes. Do you remember when Farmer Josh talked to us about garlic ice cream? We'd never heard of it, but he says it's great. Speaking of Farmer Josh, we are going to hear from him up at his farm, but before we do that, I want to introduce you to Tim from Main Street Urban Farm. Tim knows lots about planting lots of food in a small urban garden.
Hi, I'm Tim Lyon, and with my family I run Main Street Urban Farm right here in downtown Kingston, Ontario. What you're seeing here is a piece of it, the Market Training Garden at Oak Street Community Garden. It's about the size of a football field in length and not quite as wide as a football field. And in it we try to grow about 35 different crops every year, and those vegetables grown in this small area manage to feed several thousand people. Over 780 food boxes go out to different families and households around the city, and we also donate 300 to 500 kilos of produce, as well as taking produce to the farmers market every Sunday. So you're probably wondering, how do we grow so much food in such a small space in the city? You always think that a farm is a lot bigger. There's some things that we do here, which I'd like to show you, which you can also use in your growing at home. Two of the things are growing upwards instead of just outwards, and planting succession crops so that you have lots of things growing in the same space over the season. Here's an example of two crops working together in the same spot. So garlic's a long season crop, and it's there for a long time, for a whole winter. And in the spring, when the weather warms up, we have all this space between the rows that's not being used. So what we've done is we've planted lettuce in between the rows of garlic so that the lettuce can make use of that space. And it also acts as a living mulch for the garlic. And the garlic gives a gift to the lettuce, which is it repels the pests which might bother the lettuce, such as aphids. We call those companions, so they're working together, like friends. So I hope you can imagine some ways that you can use companion planting at home. Find some plants that you think would work well together, look it up online or ask someone else, and then I look forward to checking with you again in a few weeks to see what you've done and to show you how the urban farm is coming along here.
Hi everyone, this is Josh from Fat Chance Farmstead. We're just standing here in one of my garlic fields. I understand the Grow Gardens have their garlic coming up right now, which is pretty exciting stuff, and we do here as well. If you take a quick look, maybe you want to guess at how many garlic I have growing here. No guesses? Okay. Well, we've got about 10,000 garlic in the ground here, which is pretty exciting, and we'll be pulling these up sometime in July. But aside from garlic, we also grow a wide variety of vegetables that we market through our food box program, which is really great for our farm. So how it works is our members pay in advance at the beginning of the season, and then they get a box of vegetables each week during the growing season. But by getting that payment so early on in the season, it releases a lot of the financial stress on our farm, as most of our expenses are at the beginning of the year as opposed to in the middle and at the end. So it's early May now, which means we're getting right into the busy planting season. I grow 30 different kinds of fruits and vegetables here on the farm, and you can actually see some of them here in the greenhouse. They're currently in their seedling stage, but in a few weeks, all of these kohlrabi transplants will actually be going into the ground. And the benefit of having so many different varieties of vegetables growing is that, well, our customers get to try a whole bunch of different things, but it also means we have diversity, which is going to help with pest issues, and it's also going to help with crop losses for us. If we have something that doesn't like the heat as much, there are other plants that really do enjoy the heat, so they're going to thrive in that situation, and vice versa if it's cold or if it's too wet. So that diversity is really important for the viability of our farm. Another way we practice biodiversity on our farm is through planting crops that we don't actually harvest. And we also plant a variety of cover crops. And those are also plants that we plant but don't actually harvest. We work them back into the soil after they've grown, and they do a variety of things, whether it's pulling nutrients up from the soil for our plants in the following season, or they control weeds basically by covering the entire field, and so the weeds can't grow up, and they also increase the organic matter that's gonna be in the soil, and also the carbon, which just helps feed the different biodigesters that are in the soil, whether that's beetles or worms or smaller organisms that we can't actually see, because our soil is very much alive and we need to feed it. Another way we practice biodiversity on the farm is through our fence rows, which we're standing in right now. On most farms, you don't typically see maintenance of hedgerows as a big priority. Often what you'll actually see is farms removing fence rows to turn, say, 1 or 2 2 or 3 fields into one big field. But what we're doing here is actually reestablishing this one. The old fence row's here, and it's definitely looking a little sparse. And so what we've done is we've planted some new trees alongside of it to widen it up, and then to also just to give it more space to grow and flourish. And why we're doing that with our fence rows is because there's a ton of biodiversity in there, whether it's different plants, different animals, different bugs, microorganisms, and those things, they can be pollinators for our crops, or they can do pest control. There's lots of bugs and birds and small animals that are gonna take care of either bad bugs or mice or voles and stuff like that. So having the fence rows are really important to us. They also reduce the amount of wind, so can help prevent erosion in that way. And then also tree roots hold a lot of moisture as well, so your fields can even dry out a little bit faster also. Thanks for watching, and good luck with your own growing, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.